This is Israeli Technology Founders Speak, a podcast of conversations with successful Israeli high-tech and biotech entrepreneurs. With your host, Avraham Hanan. Hanan Brand is the Vice President and Head of the Startup Division at the Israel Innovation Authority. He's responsible for giving grants to hundreds of early-stage Israeli startups. Avraham sat down with Hanan to discuss what the Innovation Authority does, how to be in the 25% that get a grant, lessons he's learned over the years, why Israel is the startup nation, and much more. This podcast is a creation of J.M.B. Davis Ben David, an intellectual property law firm serving clients around the world. You have great innovations. We keep them safe. It's not enough to just have a great startup idea or innovation. If you don't legally protect your innovations, products, and brand, anyone can claim them as their own. We keep your great innovations secure. Learn more by going to jmbdavis.com. That's jmbdavis.com.
I'm sitting here with Hanan Brand from the Israel Innovation Authority. I'm really excited about this interview because over the last 50 or so episodes, we've been talking with founders, and just about everyone, a lot of founders mention the Innovation Authority. So here we are at the Innovation Authority offices in Jerusalem. Hanan, what's your position here at the Innovation Authority?
I'm the Vice President and Head of the Startup Division.
Thanks a lot for taking the time. I'm assuming you're very busy and you took time to sit with me and talk, and I hope our listeners will enjoy. First, let's start with talking about what is the Innovation Authority. Give me a 2-minute pitch about what it is, what you guys do.
Israel Innovation Authority, sometimes called abbreviated IA, is the public entity in charge of promoting Israeli high-tech. We invest every year around 2 billion shekels, so somewhere around $500 million, into Israeli technologies. We do that in a few ways. First of all, we invest directly into startups. So around 700 startups receive our funding every year. Second of all, indirect investment. So we promote incubators, innovation center, angel clubs, infrastructure, every type of activity that we can do in order to promote Israeli high tech. And the second part is we're also the regulators. So we are able to promote Israeli tech in front of other public entities, issues such as regulation, taxation, and other barriers of Israeli high tech.
700 startups are getting funding from the Innovation Authority.
Yeah.
There are about 9,000 startups. So we're talking about less than 10%?
It's more than 10% if you take into consideration the new companies that are established every year in Israel. Especially if you look at deep tech, we're a very important player.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about deep tech in Israel. Maybe expand on that and what's its importance in Israel and why is it important for the Innovation Authority?
Okay, so Israel was always great in technology. In the last 10 years, of course, we see unicorns and success stories. However, most of the companies that we know are focused on cybersecurity and fintech and software. And one of the things we want as a nation is to see more diversity in the companies itself and their technology edge. In these areas, there are higher risk. It could be a risk of technology, it could be a risk of science, and even a risk of go-to-market, which make more investors, private investors, reluctant of investing in these sectors. So our funding helps in the early stages in the deep tech companies to reduce the risk, and then companies can succeed and receive the funding they need in order to grow.
Making it easier to expand the types of technology in Israel, or in particular, high-risk technologies.
Yes. So our job is not to replace the private sector. That's very important for us. We work hand by hand in order to reduce the risk in the early stages, which means that we always request matching. So our investment comes in parallel to private investors who invest with us. The fact that the government is giving money to the company reduces the risk of this company in the early stages.
So let's talk about motivation here. What's in it for you guys? Why does the government invest in startups here in Israel? And is Israel unique in this regard vis-a-vis other countries?
So we're not the only public entity in the world that invests in startup, but our position is quite unique. So we were established actually in 1965 as the chief scientist of Israel, and only in 2016 we spun out into a public entity that is completely public funded, but we're not part of any ministry, called the Israel Innovation Authority. So on that type, we're actually very close to the private market. We don't see ourselves as a governmental entity, but actually an enabler for the public sector. most of our employees here in the IAA are people who came from the private sector, and there's a good chance they will go back. So we're able to be very connected and help the private side.
Okay. And so what's the motivation here behind having an innovation authority?
There are sectors, as I said before, that are able to succeed by themselves. There are sectors where it's much, much harder, and without any public funding, the chances of these companies to succeed are lower, and that's why we focus on deep tech. Mm-hmm. As everyone knows, Israel is very dependent on high tech. Around 57% last year of exports came from high tech. More than 20% of our GDP is focused on high tech, and somewhere around 12 to 13% of our population work in high tech. So it's such an important sector, more important than other sectors in other countries. It's very important that we have agency that all of our focus is to promote this high tech, not only to fund it, but also to find areas of problems and areas of that we can help reduce friction, reduce regulation for the high-tech companies here in Israel.
Okay. A lot of the companies that we have interviewed over the course of the last 50 episodes on this podcast are somehow connected to health tech, whether it's bio or medical device. Can you talk a little bit about those fields and about what's your impact as the Innovation Authority on those fields?
So around 40% of our investment every year goes into different sectors of health, which could be pharmaceuticals, medical devices, digital health, and other sectors, mainly because we have very strong innovation here. The hospitals, for example, are very innovative and are producing a lot of these technologies, but are also a great place for pilots. So these hospitals can be places for experiments and others. Israel was always strong in healthcare. However, healthcare is harder than software. In some of these spaces, it will take you time to receive your FDA approval. It will take you time until you have actual revenues. And that's also one of the reasons that we're very active in healthcare. In the last couple of years, we also have a national program called the Bioconvergence. Bioconvergence is a sector that combines both scientific breakthrough, so it could be from the biology side, and more engineering risk. So the combination between the engineering and the biologic side creates a lot of super innovative technologies, very futuristic, that we're very happy to support.
Can you give us an example of such a technology?
So, for example, biochips. Okay, these are actually chips that resemble an organ of human beings. Instead of doing all of experiments today on human beings, you can do it on chips, resemble an organ or actually the whole physical body. That's one of the main breakthroughs that we're seeing these days.
Okay.
And of course, it combines both an engineering risk and a biologic risk. And the people you need in this team are both from biology and engineering.
Okay. So where do you think the Innovation Authority is going in terms of growth, innovation? Are you looking at different fields in the future? You think you're going to be pivoting to other fields or growing or investing more as time goes on?
So an important part for us, we never choose sectors. Okay, so our investment committees, we receive more than 3,000 applications for funding every year. As I said, we approve somewhere around 700 of them, so like a 25%. We don't choose which sectors to invest in. So our investment committee doesn't come and say, oh, this year let's put 40% here and 30% here. We check all of the companies, compare them to each other based on innovation, technology, the team, potential of the market, and the best one wins. And we will continue to do that in the future.
I see.
However, there are sectors where we see a potential, a very big potential for Israeli companies, and we can also act top-down. For example, in climate tech, energy, water, agriculture, we saw a lot of potential for Israeli companies, but not enough funding, not enough companies established. So we created a national program in order to support these sectors. So on one side, we don't decide which sectors to invest in directly, but we do have a lot of activities to promote them, and we always check what could be next for Israel and where can we lead on a global level.
What makes the Innovation Authority sustainable? I understand there are grants. I myself applied for a grant when I had an idea about 10 years ago for a startup. So I was in the 75% that did not get the grants. Okay. And that was a time where I took a little bit of time off of being patent attorney full-time to develop this startup idea. But I have experience with trying and approaching the Innovation Authority. So I've worked with the Innovation Authority from this end. My question is, what's leading that statistic? What are you looking for? How are you going to be in that 25% that gets funding?
First of all, on a personal level, you can always reapply. So a company who did not receive our funding can improve its application and then apply again, or go to a different program that is more suitable. So many companies who receive no, don't take it personally and then apply again. I recommend that
personally, but I guess the time wasn't right for it. I think that one of the important things that I got from the Innovation Authority is that I got input on my idea. And in other words, it's not just a check. That's not all I was looking for. But I was able to get input and say, okay, why we didn't invest? Or maybe do you guys give input also why we do invest? Or how active are you in terms of input to the founders, to the people that apply for the grants?
So I came from the VC sector where we would invest in 1% of the companies we see. So in the IA, we're higher, right? The 25%, it's not too bad. However, we are looking for more or less the same parameters. So we're looking for a great team, for great technology. We're looking some traction, some proof that this will actually work. We're looking for a good market. Okay, the total available market needs to be big. So all of these, by the way, are T. So it's the T model. However, we're not interested in terms. Like, I'm not interested what valuation you're coming in and what you're receiving, because the money that we give you is non-dilutive. We don't take any equity in these companies. We're not looking to make a return, but our return in the public sector would be more jobs. It will be a big company that creates a lot of technology in Israel, exports. So our success is measured differently. That means that some of the founders who approach us have a small market, for example, or have a smaller potential. And there's no good reason to invest money from tax into a company that in best case scenario will have 5 employees or 7 employees. We're looking for the big stories and some of the companies who are rejected based on their potential.
I see. Okay, so it's a little bit of a different evaluation than what's done in the private sector, because you're just not looking at the return on investment is defined differently,
It's defined differently, yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk about a question I'd like to ask founders also. What makes Israel unique in terms of the field of startups?
I think there's a few unique points. First of all, culture. So we view failure as a step towards success. In other countries, sometimes when you fail, they see it as a failure that will continue with you for many years. I prefer, as an investor, to invest in a company who failed in the past than someone who didn't try before. And we really embrace failure as part of the process. That's one.
Interesting. So I guess the founder who fails won't make that same mistake again.
He will make no mistakes instead, but at least not the ones he did before. The second thing is multidisciplinary entrepreneurs. We see a lot of combinations of people from very unique sectors combined together. And you can see it more actually in the last 2 years, people who went to reserve duty, who found themselves working together, engineers and doctors, physicists and car repairers, dentists who work with an AI expert. And the fact that you're able to take very distinct areas and work together on solving a problem is something very unique here.
Interesting.
Quite a lot.
And you're saying that reserve duty has something to do with it?
Our idea fund is called Nufa. Okay, it's where we give 200,000 shekel for your idea, even as a private, before you create a company. And we saw a 60% increase during the war of submissions. And then we checked, why did we get so many submissions? And one of the reasons is people who met each other in reserve duty. They had a lot of time to think about unique ideas and cross-border solutions. And this is very Israeli. The fact that two people can find themselves in the north and then have a new idea and establish a startup.
That's amazing. So two people could be like in a tank together and just stuck there for 24 hours.
Nothing else to do.
They might as well talk about new innovations.
And out of their place of a regular place, right? Out of the hospital or out of their company, they can think about their real ideas in life.
Wow.
Another thing, and maybe related to the last point, is the close network. It's so easy to meet each other. Israelis are very outgoing. They're able to meet each other in every place, and everyone knows everyone else. And that pace, I think we have an advantage. There's this word that doesn't have a translation in English, firgun. Some people know it from German, that says, I'm happy for your success, more or less. So if you succeed, I succeed. And that's very important, I think, for Israeli tech, the ability to work together. Sometimes even if you're competitors.
Like mentoring, helping out others without necessarily looking at the return on the investment.
Right. So if you ask for my help, I can say, what can I gain from that? But I would probably say, yeah, sure, I'll help you. I'll connect you to someone else. I'll share my ideas with you. And that's quite unique for Israeli DNA. And maybe the last thing is Israelis really love to solve problems. Once you tell them this is a problem you should solve, it's impossible, and you bring smart people to the room, they will solve it. And they will insist until they solve it. They will not go home and tell everyone did a bad method until they came. They think they're the most genius people in the room. And I think this can always solve things is important for startups.
Wow, that's interesting insight. I guess you're looking at it from the macro level, seeing a lot of different startups and being able to evaluate like what works, what's in our DNA. So that it seems accurate what you're saying. So thank you for that.
I think we were always good at tech. right? In other countries, when they talk about startups, sometimes it could be an online website for socks. That will be considered a startup. In Israel, that will probably not be considered a startup. It will be a business. And we're always looking for this edge on our competitors on a global level. It's not enough to find an arbitrage where there's a market, a private market that you can invest where others are not doing it. We look globally. We're trying to compete with companies in the Silicon Valley, in the European Union, in Asia. And almost all of the companies we see who succeed here are built as global companies from day one. Trying to solve real problems today includes technology, includes real technology. Because if all of your edge today is maybe a different method or a different software, especially in the AI era, your added value is not too big. If you have a deep technology that supports you with strong IP that can be protected, then you have an added value and a chance to succeed.
I see. So in terms of IP, how important is IP in companies that you're...
IP is very important for us. For private investors, sometimes we don't really care, especially because in software, it's very hard to defend a technology. However, because we're less in pure software, the IP is very important. Because if you're able to build a great company and you can be copied easily, then you will probably be defeated. Even if you're first in market, somebody will do it cheaper than you, maybe in the East, and you lose. So I think it's very important that companies who approach us check their potential IP, the way to protect their technology and idea on a longer term.
So you said that one of your goals is in essentially forming jobs here in Israel, which makes sense because more jobs in Israel means more taxpayers, more taxes, more government income. But the question is, what's preventing a startup that you're investing in from taking off and then getting bought out by a multinational company and leaving Israel? What's the incentive for them to stay in Israel?
First of all, exits are great. We're really happy to see, a multinational company who buys an Israeli startup is usually a good thing for us. Because first of all, they need to pay. They will repay us also our investment and will also pay tax on that exit. But that's not the reason that it's a good thing. The good thing is in most chances when an American company or a European company buys an Israeli company, they keep the R&D. The main reason to buy the company is not because there is an IP that they take out of Israel. It's because they like the Israeli employees, human capital, potential. And there's companies who were bought with 100 employees and now have 1,000 in Israel. However, I would say in some cases, it's not a good thing because companies who have potential to grow here significantly are bought too early. In the last couple of years, we're seeing more founders who are taking bold moves, not selling too early and continuing to build companies by themselves. For example, Mobileye, for example, Wiz, and they're able to become very significant for Israeli economy.
How do you encourage that sort of activity among Israeli companies?
I think in bottom line, it's their decision. The government shouldn't tell you what to do. If the right thing is to sell the company with all of the implications, then sell it. And if you stay private, it's your decision. I'm happy that there is an opportunity. For example, let's say you can be bought for now $500 million. You can probably also raise money at a $5 million valuation, which means you have an opportunity either to go and sell it, and that's fine, or raise growth capital in order to grow the business. The two options are viable. Later on, you can also IPO at a NASDAQ or an Israeli stock market. And that's another option to stay private for longer term.
I see. Okay. Good answer. That's one of the things I think that a lot of people are thinking about today. Like, what's going to be the future for Israeli technology? If the companies are growing and then getting bought out, then as long as they stay here in terms of R&D, then that's a good thing. I agree.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that venture capital is our fuel. And for venture capital to succeed and raise additional capital, they need to show results. So if my investor was happy and made 10x of his money, and now his fund is doing well, it means that he will be able to bring more money to Israel to the next company. So that's why exits are good. The second thing, one of the things I love the most is founders become serial founders.
Right.
So after they take 1 year maybe to cover their rent or debt, there's a good chance that they will continue and build another company. Some of them will invest their money in other startups, like younger startups. We're seeing a lot of angel investors who are founders. So in some way, all of this creates more activity for the Israeli startup nation.
I see. Okay, good. Can you share with us some important success stories that the Innovation Authority has had?
So it's a bit hard to point on a specific company, as somewhere around 60% of companies who succeeded in Israel got to M&A IPO started with our funding. I prefer not to choose winners, but in our numbers, just for example, for this year, out of all of the deep tech companies who raised more than $70 million, we checked it, 80% of them received our funding in the beginning. And that's really fun to see that some public support in the first phases helped these companies to succeed.
Okay, great. That sounds good. As you know from your past experience working as an investor, no investor has a perfect track record, and sometimes you make mistakes. How does the Innovation Authority deal with that?
So, venture capital is sometimes also called risk capital in Hebrew, hon sikun. Mm-hmm. In some cases, I think that we're taking more risk than the private sector. And we're there to take the bigger bets that sometimes the private sector is not taking. If I see a really crazy technology that comes to our committee, the chances it will succeed are 2%. But if it will succeed, it will change the world, we will bet on it. And because much less private investors will bet in such a company. And we see that the fact that we take the first step sometimes, the government is putting the first money in, helps this company to go through what's called the valley of death and then raise the private capital. You can see it, for example, in quantum companies. All of the quantum computer companies in Israel started with the IIA funding. All of them.
I see.
And it's such a futuristic subject that without our funding, the companies would probably not even exist today.
And then they can get to a point where they're more ripe and more investable by private capital.
The risk is lower, and then the private market comes easier into the deal.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the role that the Innovation Authority has after investing. What sort of the role? You're taking an active role in the companies?
So we don't take an active role. Part of our strategy is we don't take any equity. We don't have any decisions. Our money is a non-dilutive grant that you only return to us if you succeeded. If you didn't succeed, we took the risk. And it's very important for us not to take these additional steps because it's not a company that is governmental. It's your company, and we helped you a bit in the beginning. We do help companies in other sectors. So if we find the barriers, regulation, taxation, import, incubators, lack of funding, we can do a lot of activities in order to help with that, human capital programs, but it won't be on a company by company level. It will be on the ecosystem level.
Through the system that's already built by the Innovation Authority. No. Can you talk a little bit about the incubator field here in Israel?
Incubator started in 1991. It's already 35 years since it was established. I had the privilege to work at 3 incubators funded by the IIA in the past. The numbers are amazing. They created more than 2,500 companies during these years, somewhere around 60 new companies that were established every year. And if you only check deep tech, close to 50% of companies who raised Series A started in an incubator in the deep tech sector. So it's very influential. However, we did do some significant changes in the last couple of years. In the past, incubators were focused on the periphery mainly. So they were spread out and all. Today, we're not focused on the periphery in the incubators. Most of the incubators are now in the center of Israel because we're trying to build the best companies possible. The second thing is we're investing only in deep tech. We're not looking to build incubator, to build media technologies or cybersecurity. All of them are very deep tech. The third thing, they're a combination of both financial investors and strategics. So some of the biggest international companies are in the incubators. For example, Pfizer and AstraZeneca and Medtronic and Siemens. And I can go on now for 20 minutes. Companies from the States and from Europe who came here in order to establish new companies. And that's great.
Okay, and I guess that means that the focus of the program has changed. And then with these early connections with large multinational companies, that's a lot of potential to these new companies that are starting.
Because the incubators are based on creating new companies, not investing in them. They actually do an ideation process in order to create new startups in Israel. The fact that you have the international companies help you focus on the biggest problems of the world. So just maybe one example, we have a lab called Ion Labs, one of these incubators, that is creating challenges based on the issues of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And then they create hackathons and events based on that to create new companies. This is very valuable to the companies to build themselves based on real problems that have a big market.
Our religious listeners are familiar with Ion Labs because we interviewed Mati Gil. I don't know if it was 10 episodes ago or longer than that, but we definitely got a little bit of a taste of.
So we currently have an open tender. So if somebody is interested, he can participate.
Okay. So Hanan, thank you very much for participating in Israel Technology Founder Speak. We made an exception to the rule that you're not a founder of the Innovation Authority, and we're still interviewing you, but I think this is necessary and important for our listeners to hear to get some insight about the Innovation Authority. I at least got some insight, and I hope our listeners do as well.
Thank you.
And wishing you personally and also for the Innovation Authority to have lots of success in achieving its goals. And hopefully we'll hear a lot of good things coming out of the Innovation Authority over the next few years.
Thank you.
That was Hanan Brand, the Vice President and Head of the Startup Division at the Israel Innovation Authority. We hope you enjoyed this episode. There are many more to come. Do you have a great innovation or startup idea? We'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us by going to our website, jmbdavis.com. And if you go to jmbdavis.com/startup, you'll see we have a special site specifically made for startups to help startups protect their innovations. Please be in touch with us and find out how we can help you. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode.